Hi, Mike Mobile. Could you tell me, is this Mike Spadia?
It is not.
Okay, thank you. What hearing are you here for?
Easton Conservation Commission.
Is there a particular application?
Yes, I am here to participate in the 91 Union Street hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Jennifer, you got your documents and key back?
I did, yes, thank you.
Okay, all set.
Rory, can I advise you of a change on the agenda?
Okay.
50 Rollins Road, the DPW, the DEP number is 1657.
Recording in progress.
Okay. But being on or about 6:30, bring this meeting of October 17, 2022, the Conservation Commission to order. Should know this by now, but in keeping with an act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency as amended by Governor Baker on February 12, 2022, the meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. This meeting is being recorded, audio and video by ECAT, and will be available at a later time. For the purposes of establishing quorum, we'll take a roll call attendance.
Benson, aye. Present.
Rossman present. Caulfield's present. So seeing that we have a quorum, we will proceed. Just before we proceed, Al, there's something going on with your video.
I know. It looks like I'm in a steam bath, but really it isn't.
Okay.
I don't know how to fix it.
I'll have to get the tech over there. So just for my purposes, as we proceed here, 46 Rockland has requested a continuance.
Yeah, at the very last minute today.
And the other one that's already on the agenda but requested a continuance is 464 Foundry.
Correct.
Is anything else continuing?
15 Rollins request for a certificate of compliance.
Is requesting a continuance?
Correct.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, so for the public, anybody who here might be for any of those items, they've been continued to a future meeting. That's 46 Rockland, 464 Foundry Street, and 15 Rollins. Okay, so first up is 46 Rockland, who has requested a continuance to our next meeting.
Yes.
So that's November 7th.
7.
So I make a motion to continue 46 Rockland to November 7th.
Second.
Caulfield's with Benson second. Roll call.
Benson, aye.
Grossman, aye. Caulfield's aye. Next up is 91 Union Street. This is a continued hearing for notice of intent for proposed apartment complex access drive and parking, stormwater grading utilities, and on-site wastewater treatment facility. Now we have Damien. I know there was Michael Mobile, maybe.
So we brought up the applicants first. So Damien and Mike Toohill.
Just a point of information here, 59 Meeting House is also requesting a continuance. I know we didn't get that on. Scott's actually in the Q&A right now. So we'll take care of that after we're done with this to notify them. I don't think we want Scott to hang around until then, but although he might be here for 5:34 Washington anyway. Okay, so we have Mike Toohill up here. Thanks, Mike. Damian, do we want to bring anybody else on your side, Mike?
I don't think so. There was one other person that had called in and Tish was asking who it was, Mike Mobile.
Yep. Let me promote Mike.
I'm not sure who that is.
He's on the butter side.
So when we get to public comments, we'll promote him.
Okay.
That's Pyle, Kagan, Mobile. Scott Horsley, he's on the butter comments.
Yep.
Keeping everybody straight. Okay, we had somebody from Beta that we were expecting too, weren't we?
We were.
Okay.
Should be here.
I guess that's who I was looking for. Okay, so where we are right here at this point, I think we had some questions on stormwater for the most part. Jennifer, why don't you bring us up to speed a little bit about where we are? I know we got Beta's responses back.
Yes, Beta was looking into the letter from Mr. Mobile and Horsley. And so they were should be here at some point to go over it. They did not find an issue from what I read out of their report. But I was hoping they would be here on time. So they may have expected it to go a little later.
Okay. So I know there are some questions even from our perspective, and maybe we could cover those before we get to public comment on this. I don't know, Damian or Mike, you have anything to offer before we begin here?
No, I thought, Mr. Chairman, I thought we were fairly well through all of the Wetland Protection Act resource area issues, including the mitigation. We had, as you recall, we had done some redesign work to pull things out of riverfront. We added several different planting areas for mitigation. And I think the primary questions were stormwater and probably the wastewater, the infiltration system for the wastewater, which is still pending with DEP, but that's not a Wetland Protection Act issue.
So Jennifer, we meant to consider stormwater in this permit?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So given that, so I know there was some concerns on one side, and then there was some discussions about some of the modeling that was done and the test pits and whatnot. But I think that Beta had, and I really wish Beta was here to sort of speak to it, gave us a report related to that particular issue. Maybe if they show up, but and I know when we go to public comment, we'll actually probably get some comments related to that, so we can expect that. But is there any questions or comments from the commission before we go that route? So there was some question that was being raised that at some point that the model in being used was related to an unconfined system, and there was some concern that when we can you just give us a perspective of when we put in the retaining walls around, I don't know what percentage of the development it is, 50%, 60%, what that does to the unconfined nature of this project as opposed to when we're looking at groundwater, or whether it is truly unconfined at that point?
I mean, the groundwater modeling analysis, I mean, it's the stormwater, everything to that extent is designed per the standards. You know, these systems, infiltration chambers and everything are placed behind retaining walls pretty regularly. The retaining walls themselves are, you know, they're block retaining walls. You know, they breathe. There's a drainage course behind them. There's not to any extent going to be, you know, confined by any means. If that's yeah, I mean, the model is up to the standards.
Yeah, so I think,
reviewed.
you know, I think that one of the issues when you're dealing with, you know, Conservation Commission members, we have varying levels of understanding of these complicated scientific, you know, calculations that go into stormwater. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we rely upon, you know, consultants to sort of help us through that. I mean, I think in this case, if you could just sort of give us the version that we can sort of understand that if there is stormwater in this development and what happens to it when it hits the retaining wall that makes it continue to behave in the manner that was consistent, whether or not the retaining walls were there or not. So I guess that's the question that I'm placing before you.
Okay. Yeah. So here I'll screen share. So it might give a little more reference to what's going on the site. I think the concern with the retaining walls and the stormwater. So everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So I believe the major or the location with further concern was this system over here. Am I correct? I believe it was discussed the larger system on the side of the site.
Okay.
So this actual system, the bottom of such, this is infiltration system. I believe. Let me get it called out. Where is the chamber? Call out proposed. Yeah, 3. Is actually the bottom of the system. The bottom elevation of the trenches is at elevation 172, which is the surface grade of the existing conditions under that. So we found, you know, groundwater more than 4 feet below that by the test pits that were out there. So the water will, you know, infiltrate into the ground, and it really won't break out through the retaining walls in that area. As you know, it's getting pulled down by gravity through, you know, hydraulic conductivity into the groundwater systems, and you know, it is below the retaining walls, basically at that elevation, right? And the mounding, you know, works in, you know, almost a reverse bell, you know, an upside down bell curve or a regular bell curve type situation where it spreads out, you know, focused underneath the main part of the system, and then as it hits groundwater, as the water infiltrates into the ground, you know, it slowly seeps out away and it raises that, but then, you know, it falls back down. We're 4 feet, you know, groundwater is 4 feet below that system. So that bell curve, the flared end parts of that bell curve are, you know, 4 feet below grade at the lowest point there. And at the highest point is actually underneath the chambers. So
Damien, can you flip to the other ones? Because this one that you're looking at now, the large one, is primarily in Brockton, and the wetlands are all in Brockton.
okay, yeah. I mean, so it's similar in all scenarios. You know, the main part of where the chambers are set, you know, and then the bell curve and how the mounding and the interaction between the system and the chambers are the same. You know, it'll be high, you know, during those stormwater, you know, systems. We'll have that arch underneath the chambers in which the, you know, water will infiltrate to the ground. It'll make the connection to the groundwater, and then slowly, as the water infiltrates, that mound will flatten out. You know, we set the distances and everything per stormwater standards. You know, there's, you know, plenty of cover over the tops of these systems. You know, the bottom of the chambers, again, these are 4 foot high systems, so the surface elevation, you know, 180. You can see we're at 175 here. The bottom of infiltration chamber system, I believe this is 2, is at 74, and then also the other ones at 72. So those are all relatively at, surface elevation or slightly below existing surface elevation. So, all of the other systems, everything is significantly higher above that. We're at elevation 180, at surface grade below above this. So, these chambers are deep in the ground. They're, right up in 4 feet above groundwater, at the tightest points. And, the water should permeate down into the existing groundwater table, and have slight, that bell curve edges outward.
So I guess the question that I have is that does water that doesn't actually make it into the actual infiltration basin, is it constrained at all by the retaining wall system? So I can understand what happens to the water that makes it into the infiltration system, but I assume that there is regular groundwater that is meant to sort of be handled by the regular ground, as part of this development.
So our the entirety of our site is above finished grade. So groundwater is, below the surface elevation. So we are not restricting existing groundwater in any way, shape or form. The footings, the foundations, if you see for these retaining walls, are not very deep. They're only about a block or two, below the surface, and then there's a crushed stone granular pad behind it. And you said, we're not by any means digging deep into the water, having, these far impacts into below surface grade. And then, they're held back by these tiebacks and the way that the blocks are built and constructed themselves.
So is it the conclusion here is that the groundwater is going to infiltrate to the normal groundwater level, which is below the level of the walls already?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't this whole study is based upon an late August sampling. And when the samples were taken, it was among the driest years in recent history in the state. So I believe that what you're representing as the groundwater table is really underrepresented versus the normal year. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned is the effluent is going to be putting in something like 2,000 cubic feet a day of effluent into this site. And I based that upon the data that was represented by the state for the average water utilization for different size apartments, and accumulated that, took no incremental data for the clubhouse, but that comes out to roughly 2,000 cubic feet a day. So, and I think that's in the northern part of the site. So I think there's some serious issues, and the McDonald-Morrissey analysis seemed to indicate this, that this should be redone in the spring to get an average representation, not in the middle of a summer drought reading. So I don't have any confidence in the data that is submitted and on the table right now.
So as a just sort of as me sort of framing that, so the question here is, how are we meant to interpret test pits taken in August 2021 that was number one in the middle of the dry season, in the middle of one of the most severe droughts we've had in the state in decades? How are we meant to take that information combined with other information and determine what the high groundwater level is meant to be for this particular site?
So, if I can speak,
yeah, that was a question to you.
Question directed at me, correct? Awesome. the groundwater elevations that are determined aren't actually based off of, standing and or, weeping water in the test pits. What we use is modeling. Most of the test pits, we were able to find it. Some of them, there was weeping, at different elevations due to the fill levels and difficulties of identifying modeling in those fills. But modeling is the historic, coloring and discolorization of the soil due to groundwater elevations at their highest point. It's it's the redox and oxidization of the iron and chemical or minerals in the soil. So that's where it comes, and it's blotches and stains in the soil that indicate where groundwater has been at its highest historically through the entirety of the site. And that's how we were determined our groundwater. So it's not based off of the season or the time or where, if we're in a drought of any sort. It's based off of the historic seasonal high groundwater. And that's how the design's done. That's how I think Beta did a really good job of framing that. I wish they were here to help.
No, they just did show up for sure. So
fantastic. So that's how that modeling was done, and it's the same thing with the front of the site. So that was done for the stormwater. And many of those pits that were done back there, not the ones that were done recently, but a lot of the test pits that were, corroborate and are similar to the information that I was supplied more recently, were witnessed by DEP officials for the design. We were, checking out many locations throughout the site for appropriate groundwater elevations, materials, and everything. We concluded that the front of the site had the best material for the more, the groundwater discharge, soil absorption system. And again, that was all, that's going through the DEP process, for the groundwater discharge permit. Those were, I was out there witnessed by representatives from the, local offices and the town. So that's how the groundwater was determined, that, through the standards of that. Some of the other methods that were mentioned in, the McArdle report were discussed by Beta and how, those are not, the standard way at which stormwater is designed, and how we use modeling to determine our groundwater elevations.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
sure, Mike.
It's not that dissimilar from what we do with hydric soils when we're delineating wetlands. We don't look for water breakout in our holes when we're augering for wetlands. We look at the soils and we look at that historic record, because it takes a long time for those hydric characteristics, the modeling that Damien was talking about, due to high groundwater. It takes a long time for those to develop, and they last a long time, and they last through seasons, they last through years. So that's why we can go out and delineate wetlands in July. The same reason why Damien can go out in August and do test pits for infiltration systems, because there's kind of a historic record within the soil itself as to where high groundwater really is.
Okay. So I know I promoted Gary James from Beta here so that we could get some feedback from him on this particular issue and make sure that we have some understanding of what Beta's review of this showed related to estimated groundwater levels and design of the system. So,
thank you very much.
can you just identify yourself for the record, Mr. James?
Gary James, PE. I'm with the Beta Group. I'm the peer review engineer on behalf of the planning board for the town of Easton. I actually did the review on this also for the city of Brockton, for that portion within the limits of the city of Brockton associated with the stormwater. So, there's been a lot of discussion here associated with the estimated seasonal high groundwater. And part of the issue that has been brought in by Hill Law was the issue of relative to the utilization of the Frimpter adjustment. It's not uncommon for us to allow the ability to be able to make a determination of groundwater based on historical modeling. Remember too, this site has been manipulated in the past terribly. I mean, when you look at the test pits that were done on the back side, all the indications were that there's probably about 5 to 6 feet of fill associated with that. And even some, in quite a few of them, the models were actually within the limits of the fill. And in some of the instances too, what you're going to see is that when they did do the observations, they actually ran into what I believe to be subsurface structures. So the water table, even as we stand right now, is being manipulated by what they've done in the past. So when you look at the models, there are some instances where the models are actually below the water table. But I think this site responds very quickly to rainfall. And even the August 2021 levels that they're talking about, I didn't realize it until I read they're talking about the levels that they measured in the monitoring wells, not measures associated with the test pits. But they had about 2 inches of rain, a little by 1.6 inches of rain 2 days prior to that August 23rd. The test pits they did on the 14th and the 18th, it was the same issue. They believe they had about 1.5 inches of rainfall in the days prior to that. But the more important thing is when you look at the two wetlands on either side, if you look at the wetland on the far southern side, you see it's sitting down around 167. Yeah, right there. And when you look at the wetlands up on the far side that are being supported by the outfall coming off of Pleasant Street, they're right around 168. So you would anticipate the groundwater level should be somewhere between those, between 168 and 167. And all of the indicators that came in from Conoco and indicated from the test pits indicate that the groundwater levels were right in that zone. So there's no reason to make the assumption that we're going to see, these huge fluctuations that are being predicted by Horsley and McDonald, or Horsley and Mobile associated with it. And I felt quite comfortable. I mean, I felt quite comfortable with the levels that are there. And don't get me wrong, I'm not averse to utilization of FRMTA to be able to make adjustments to the groundwater. In fact, I got to tell you right now, you have the next hearing you have, I did a review, and I'm going to request that he make a FRMTA adjustment. So I'm not averse to utilization, but if you're going to utilize FRMTA to make a comparison with regional groundwater levels, make sure that you're utilizing it correctly. The other issue too is, I mean, when you look at the way that they applied this, they made a base assumption that there was going to be 10 feet of fluctuations on this site, which FRMTA tells you in a hillside or on a terrace situation. But we're in the valley. We're right in the valley of Dorchester Brook. In fact, a portion of the site is actually inside the riverfront. So we're only about 200 feet away from Dorchester Brook. And if you look at the limiting factor associated with that stream on that southern edge of the site, there's just not a lot of room in here for the water table to fluctuate. And to fluctuate 10 feet, in fact, most of the instances we got in here, there's a lot of spots on the site where you don't even have 10 feet of soil sitting above ledge. So the application of the methodology was incorrect. And I looked at the issue associated with Mr. Benson, and Damien was correct. The footings are just not deep enough to have a real impact on groundwater levels that they would have the ability to be able to raise it. So, I didn't respond in the letter to it, but I was preparing to respond to it this evening, and he was correct in that the footings just don't go deep enough. The way that they're proposing these walls, the primary strength associated with these walls is the tieback system that they're utilizing. So when you look at all of the factors associated with this site, my gut reaction is that it's very reasonable that the elevations that they have determined on this site in terms of the utilization for groundwater, and I feel very comfortable with the design. We've reviewed this, I believe, now 3 times, Damien.
I think at least
At least 3 times. Yeah, we've gone through this. In fact, we even eliminated one of the basins that were up on the closer to Union Street. Yeah, we eliminated that basin specifically on the basis of the setback from the leaching field. So, it's gone quite a ways in terms of what the design has gone through. And I feel very comfortable in terms of the prediction of the groundwater levels as they've been presented and as they are found.
So I guess that from my perspective, and then I'll open it back up to the commission now that you're with us, is that I'm trying to get the level of confidence necessary here to know that the discharge that's happening on both the subsurface system as well as the stormwater treatment systems is able to handle the volume that's going in here from a water standpoint, a runoff standpoint, or an effluent standpoint, and not impact either French Pond across the street or Dorchester Brook in the wetlands, even further south on the site. So just, I mean, that's what, I guess that's my takeaway at this point. I agree with Mr. Toohill's explanation earlier that I think that we've probably concluded on the wetland delineation portion and the remediation and the replication standpoints that have been incorporated into the plan. And I think those issues are behind us. The issue right now in front of us is, are we going to impact either Dorchester Brook, the wetlands, or French Pond across the street with the increased water that's coming off of this site? Handled, number one, the stormwater off the site, because we're putting all this impervious surface onto this, as well as what's happening with that subsurface system. That's the wastewater treatment plant, the 2,000 cubic feet that Al is estimating. I don't know what the estimation is when we in the design that's happening. So that's where we need to get, and if we can sort of get to that answer to that question, and then we can go to public comment, and then we can go from there. And I'll leave it open. Al or Nate, I don't know if you have questions that you want to contribute there, and maybe let Mr. James and Mr. Dimitrik, respond accordingly.
Yeah, I'd like to get their comments on when they went to the state, they represented this as an unconfined aquifer. And I still believe that with all the retaining walls around that doesn't, I have a hard time getting there. But when you add the 2,000 feet of, cubic feet a day of effluent, it kind of begs the question, if that's wrong, what are the effects going to be? And I hazard a guess they're going to go largely toward the pond across the street and into Dorchester Brook. So, and it was very notable to me that Mr. James would not comment on the effluents, that were going to be released from this on the site. And I'd like to have his comments on why he doesn't, kind of stand behind those analysis.
Just hold up, Mr. James, 1 second. I just want to give Nate a chance to add anything in here. Then we'll circle back to that. I'll give you a chance to respond to that, of course, because I do want Mr. Benson's concerns addressed.
I have no comment at this time.
Okay, Mr. James or Mr. Dimitri?
Admittedly, I cannot speak to the groundwater discharge permit and the issues associated with the groundwater discharge permit because we didn't review it. We specifically only looked at the issues associated with the stormwater system on the backside of the system. So I can't really speak to the issue associated with whatever's happening. And I pretty much had to depend on the Commonwealth and Mass DEP in terms of their analysis and their review of the groundwater discharge permit. The only thing I will say is that we are quite a ways away from it in terms of the stormwater discharge, the 3 infiltration systems. I believe we're about 175, almost 200 feet away.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
quite a distance. I don't
Yeah,
have
so
it.
that was in that sense, I really wasn't overly concerned with the overall issues associated with the mounding on the on the subsurface disposal system.
How far away are you from the effluent system?
I believe we're about I'll let Damien answer that.
Yeah, let me pulling it up so I can get you a good number here. So to the closest system, the chambers, the underground chambers to is approximately 230 feet.
Yeah.
Away. Yeah, about 230 feet, and that's to the. I'll just check them all. About 200 to the closest one, and that is the one along the westerly side of the site. The one that's closer to the riverfront. So that's the infiltration chambers to the leaching field.
Yeah, so that pretty much confirms it. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't overly concerned about it and pretty much left the issues associated with the mounting analysis to the review by the department.
Did you factor in the retaining walls to any degree when you did your mounting analysis, sir?
So I did not perform the mounting analysis. That was done by GeoHydrocycle. They were a consultant outside, so I did not include those. But again, I do not anticipate that the retaining walls are going to affect groundwater, as they're above grade, above existing grade at this time. But slightly below, just for a very base footing of a block. Yeah, so I did not perform the mounting analysis. I would like to add in, just again to kind of put some things in perspective. I was doing some quick calcs just to kind of get some stuff. The effluent coming out of the from the systems it's approximately 1,900 or 19,000 gallons per day is the expected flows, which, if any, from a Title V perspective, that is an inflated flow. In the first place, that flow is so high. We designed the system due to daily fluctuations that happen during, the time frame. People shower, everything like that during the day. So 19,000 gallons per day. That works out to about, here, let me get that calc going back up again, about 0.029 cubic feet per second. A garden hose converts, which is about 7.5 gallons per minute, to 0.02 cubic feet per second. So we're talking about a slightly, over the course of a day, a slightly larger flow than a garden hose getting its way into the rest of the system. And that's added. Everything from stormwater is already existing and hitting the site. Those are things, that's the drainage systems. We're making our stormwater systems designed to control the flows that are already occurring and raining on our site. We're collecting those systems and making sure that it acts in the same way that the existing conditions does, or better, or slows over, flow over land. Where it's the exact same amount of water flow that comes in here. And then the additional is, again, effluent that's added from the septic systems that is, a very, a lower flow than you would anticipate, given the amount.
Any follow-ups here before I go to public comment?
I have one other point. Would you be adverse to taking readings on the Dorchester Brook and the pond to see what kind of effluent situation they have at present, so that we can establish later on that there's no, let's say, unexpected breakthroughs?
How would you go about that if
that
was something we were to condition?
Well, I would think you'd be able to take.
No, that was a question for Mr. Dimitri or one of the other engineers.
I'm not sure. I'm not gonna.
I guess the question mark is, are you concerned about the water quality, Mr. Benson, or you're not talking about volume, you're talking about quality, right?
Yes.
So in other words, establish a baseline water quality.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
And that way you could substantiate later on if there's, whether there is an issue or there isn't an issue.
Yes, I don't see why he couldn't do that. I don't see why that couldn't be a reasonable request in terms of looking at the water quality, especially at the discharge channel just down gradient of the site.
Yep.
Which would probably be the primary impact spot, location. Also get one at Dorchester Brook or get one at the pond, sure, to be able to establish a background level.
If
And I guess
Mr.
the question
Benson-
mark, you'd have to look specifically at the parameters you wanted. I mean, would you want to look at fecal counts or nutrient loading? I guess, Jen, I'll ask you that.
That's exactly what I was going to ask Gary, because we could do, I mean, the normal concerns are either fecal from a septic system, and this is not a septic system. This is a tertiary treatment system with almost drinking water quality going into a soil absorption system. So we could do, nitrogen is one of the concerns in groundwater. We could certainly do nitrogen testing. Phosphorus usually is not a problem because that's highly absorbed by soil. So as a nutrient, phosphorus is really not an issue. And we could do, fecal coliform also. But again, this is a tertiary system that's discharging almost drinking water quality water into a soil absorption system. The purpose of that system is not to treat the water, it's to handle it, is to discharge it.
No, I agree. I think the nutrient loading is probably the primary, and look at the fecals would be the other. But if you want, I can get a list from our wastewater group to be able to give you a specific list of what to test for and what to look for background levels.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commission before I go to public comment? I see a couple of hands already raised. So I think that Ms. Pyle and Mr. Horsley are on the same team here, so I don't know who would want to be recognized first. I'll go with Ms. Pyle since for now, and then she can bring in Mr. Horsley if she wants.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Pyle. I'm an attorney at Hill Law. Thank you for recognizing me this evening. I'm here with Scott Horsley, but first I'd like to introduce Mike Mobile, who provided a letter for your review this morning. And Mr. Mobile would like to speak about his analysis and to address some of Beta's comments and to explain to you why we believe that the estimated seasonal high groundwater has not been calculated appropriately for this site. So if I may, can you promote Mr. Mobile and then Mr. Horsley next?
Mr. Mobile is coming right up.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's a bit of a lag there as I rejoined. Could I please have the ability to share my screen if I don't already?
Yep, you got it.
Excellent, thank you.
Can you just identify yourself for the record? Be great.
I absolutely will. Do you all see a full screen slide?
We do.
All right. How about now? Full screen slide?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, good evening, members of the commission. My name is Michael Mobile. I'm the president of McDonald Morrissey Associates, LLC. We go by MMA for short. And I'm appearing this evening at the request of abutters to the proposed project. So just quick background, MMA is a group of groundwater hydrologists. We specialize in quantitative hydrology. We work all over the country for all different types of clients, and often our work involves the use or development or review of groundwater flow models or solute transport models. Personally, I hold 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's of science in hydrology from the University of New Hampshire, a master's of science in environmental engineering from Virginia Tech, and a PhD in civil engineering from Virginia Tech. Taught at the undergraduate and graduate level, groundwater hydrology concepts, and I have nearly 20 years of professional experience as a groundwater hydrologist and modeling specialist. So I also mentioned that I'm a certified groundwater professional through the National Groundwater Association. So I think it's hopefully clear that I'm qualified to perform a technical review of groundwater issues as they exist relative to the applicant's proposal. And this evening, I'd just like to start with a few slides that focus on this estimated seasonal high groundwater condition. It's really been a focal point of a couple of letters that have been issued at this point. I want to describe why it's important and describe why or what I've seen through my review of the applicant's work to date and really why it raises some significant concerns. And then I'll wrap up with just a few additional comments on some related issues. Now, I'm going to be delving into some pretty important technical details here. So commission members, please feel free to interrupt me as I go. If you don't understand something or you have questions, on-the-fly interruptions are totally welcome.
So just before we proceed here, so can you give me some time frame of how long this presentation is meant to take?
Yeah, fair enough. I think 15 minutes will be adequate. Is that allowable?
We'll see. I mean, it's an awful lot of time for us to sort of have an open-ended discussion here, but
I do think it's important.
I know, but here's part of my concern, and I believe it's important, and we've already spent close to 40 minutes on this already. So I mean, the importance of this single issue is obvious to the commission. The concern that I have is that the material was only delivered to us sometime today. I had very little time to review what was sent to us today, and now I'm meant to sort of consume this amount of material, and it's just a little bit concerning to get this highly technical information so late in the process. Now you're making a public comment, so it is that. I just don't want it to sort of be an open-ended, so just keep it as focused as possible on the estimated high groundwater issue. So
fair enough. I'll tell you what, I'll save some time, and I think my letter is quite comprehensive on the issue. And what I want to do, I provided a graphic in my letter that's based on an analysis of data, and I understand it's relatively hard to view because it's a three-dimensional, it's intended to be a three-dimensional view. So let me jump to that and jump out of this presentation and kind of run through this for you, because I think it really gets to the key point here, which is that what the applicant is currently relying upon, as Mr. Dimitrick referred to, is these soil modeling observations. In his own words, I can quote him that they're intended, their historic coloring of soil due to groundwater elevations at their highest point. They're blotches and stains that indicate where groundwater has been at its highest. So the conceptual issue here is, if those observations, that soil modeling is indeed an indication of the highest groundwater elevation, how is it possible that groundwater levels that were directly measured in site monitoring wells during August of 2021, one of the driest times, as Mr. Benson put it, one of the driest times in recent memory, how could water levels that were measured at that time be higher? And I can show you that's exactly the case. And what that says to me, doesn't say that those measurements aren't representative. It says that the redoxymorphic features of the soil modeling aren't reliable for the purpose they're being applied here, right? I mean, that's pretty simple logic. And I can show you that really quickly. Okay, so we've got this graphic up here. This is a site plan actually from that the groundwater mounding analysis that was done for the wastewater system. So we can see some of the key site features on here. You can see the positions of the site monitoring wells. I can highlight those. Okay, where you see the yellow points come on, those are locations of site monitoring wells. There's a screen in the shallow aquifer, so they support the direct measurement of the position of the water table, and that's where those August water level measurements were collected. We also have test pits on site. I can turn those on. These are the positions of the test pits. I can flip this figure off and show you that those gray locations coincide with, and a figure will come up here, coincide with these positions of the test pits. Okay. So what we can do is, by taking the depths that have been reported within the soil column by the applicant, where redoxymorphic features of soil modeling were observed, we can create a surface that represents where those are positioned in the subsurface. And we can do the same with the groundwater elevations that were measured in August of 2021. I'm going to turn those two things on here one at a time. Here's the groundwater surface. It only extends over a portion of the site because the monitoring wells don't extend into the southern area where the stormwater infiltration is proposed. And I can show you where that is. These yellow areas are the approximate extents of those 3 infiltration systems, stormwater infiltration systems. So we don't have monitoring wells in those areas, but we have some that are relatively close by. And now we can turn on the surface that represents the soil modeling elevations. Okay. Now what you're seeing here is some areas where the red surface, so where the soil modeling occurred in the subsurface, does rise above where the blue surface is. And that would make sense, right? If those redoxymorphic features were representative of the highest condition, that's what we would anticipate. That red surface should be above. And that does occur in the northern part of the site in certain areas where there is not significant fill. But as you move south on the site, we start to see this separation. And if we rotate in space here, you can see, and there's vertical exaggeration here, but you can see what I mean, right? So we're moving south and we're seeing that blue surface rising above where the redoxymorphic features were observed. So that's saying in those areas that the water table at this low point in time in August of 2021 was somehow measured at an elevation that's higher than what the applicant in general is using for their estimated seasonal high groundwater condition. And so that's dangerous for a variety of reasons, right? According to the Mass Stormwater Handbook, and I'll just show you this slide really quickly. There are 2 key elevations that are used, or that the estimated seasonal high groundwater condition is used against to show compliance with requirements under the Mass Stormwater Handbook. For one, the bottoms of these systems need to be at least 2 feet above that estimated seasonal high groundwater condition. So if you're placing it too low, there's a possibility that it could be high enough that it simply invalidates the position of the systems without performing any additional analysis, right? If these estimated seasonal high groundwater levels are substantially higher, the bottoms of these systems may be designed too low. There's also the 4-foot criterion. So if there's less than 4 feet between the bottom of the proposed system and the estimated seasonal high groundwater condition, you need to perform an additional step of analysis. And that's a mounding analysis that focuses on the degree of change, temporary rise in the water table caused by infiltration from the stormwater system. And I'm a little concerned about what I heard before, because Mr. Dimitruk talked about, well, you know, groundwater is not really going to change as infiltration occurs, but then he said it will locally below these systems. Well, that latter description is correct. Groundwater will rise below these systems at a degree to which, and the lateral extent to which that groundwater will rise has not been looked at all to this point. You only get a look at that if you perform a groundwater mounding analysis. And the risk of not performing that analysis is the possibility of adversely affecting the infiltration of these systems. And I talk about this in the letter. If those systems don't infiltrate as they're designed, you're not going to get as much recharge. And that's one requirement under the stormwater performance standards. So that reduction could invalidate the compliance with that stormwater standard. And then you're probably going to see the system react by pushing more water out and increasing the maximum discharge rate. And that's another stormwater performance standard that needs to be met. So to me, the issue here is that this estimated seasonal high groundwater condition is clearly, like, objectively, based on these measured water levels, low. The question is, how much higher is it? And I can understand Mr. James' comments. Well, what I can say is I've reviewed Mr. James' comments about the applicability of the perimeter analysis here, but I think he sort of misses the bigger point. When I did that exercise, it was simply to explore another option that can be used to evaluate estimated seasonal high groundwater conditions. I wasn't attempting to propose design levels. I was simply trying to support this observation that what's being used is too low. What really needs to be done here is to fill this information gap. And I think what we could see, according to the Mass Stormwater Handbook, is that the best option here is pretty well spelled out. When redoxamorphic features, I'm reading from the Mass Stormwater Handbook here, when redoxamorphic features aren't available, which I'll contend in this case, they're not reliable, certainly, installation of temporary push point wells or piezometers should be considered. Ideally, such wells should be monitored in the spring when groundwater is at its highest, and the results should be compared to nearby groundwater wells monitored by the USGS to estimate whether the regional groundwater is below normal, normal, or above normal. That's what I'm proposing here. We need to install additional monitoring wells in these areas where stormwater infiltration is proposed. They need to be monitored at a high temporal frequency using pressure transducers that go right in the wells, and they alleviate the responsibility of having someone go out and manually measure and the possibility of missing the high condition. And then you need to evaluate versus the USGS records to make sure you're getting a representative wet season captured in the data record. Okay, so that's one issue. Just quickly, I want to touch on the wastewater issue. I can appreciate Mr. James saying he didn't review this. The fact of the matter is there is an analysis here. As I spell out in my letter, based on my review, I've gone through a pretty significant effort to recreate the applicant's consultant's model to the best of my ability based on the limited information they've provided, which is incomplete. But I'm producing results that are almost identical to what their model is yielding. And what I'm seeing are significant increase. Oops, excuse me. Apologize. I'm seeing significant increases in the predicted volumetric flow rates to the neighboring water resources. So I believe in my letter, I state that based on my assessment, I'm seeing on the order of nearly 7,000 gallons per day groundwater discharge increase to the wetland that's highlighted on this slide, this portion of that they identify as wetland L. That's remained completely unaddressed by the applicant to date. And realistically, this model is not designed in a way that supports an analysis like this, but it would appear based on communications we've seen between GHC, the applicant's consultant, and Mass DEP, they're using the model in this way. So there's sort of a deficiency issue, and then there's a completeness issue that really are completely unaddressed at this point. So a number of concerning issues, and really a lot to do to even get to the point of trying to claim that this design is somehow the stormwater designs in compliance with applicable standards, and that they can demonstrate that the proposed wastewater system isn't going to have negative impacts. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I know it took a bit of time here, but if the board or if the commission has any questions, I'm more than happy to address them. Thank you.
Just before, and I know there's going to be some questions from my side, as well as probably asking for some input from our consultant on this. Just as a point of information, Jennifer, can you just clarify for me, is the wastewater treatment system at all under this permit, or is that strictly being handled by the state?
That would be under DEP. That was actually one of my questions. Have those letters that you've submitted to us also been submitted to DEP wastewater division, and what's their time frame for review? If you know it.
I don't know if my letters have been submitted to DEP. I certainly haven't directly sent them. Ms. Pyle may have.
We have not sent it to DEP yet. There's sort of a limited opportunity for outsiders to comment. We can do that. We can attempt to influence the process there. But I do think that it's within the commission's purview to look at the wastewater as well, because of the potential for alterations to the wetlands if they're being overloaded with large amounts of wastewater effluent or nutrients, and that would come within the definition of alter under the Wetlands Protection Act. And so I do think that you can look at it to ensure that the wetlands are protected.
So Jennifer, just as I'm gonna, and please just, this is between me and Jennifer here. So Jennifer, can you tell me the, since we haven't seen any of that wastewater system analysis and design, how could we interpret that? And then when DEP is doing that, aren't they including that in their analysis of that?
They should be reviewing that, but we don't typically see that. That's not part of wetland purview. You know, the presumption is if it meets DEP standards, that it's met the presumption under wetlands.
We don't know if it has met the DEP standards yet. They've been reviewing it for a long time.
Right, but are you suggesting that we hold off on issuing our permit until DEP signs off on the wastewater? Ms. Pyle?
Yes, that would be preferable. And
One of the things that
on
might
this
be,
issue, if I may, I know Mr. Horsley would also like to speak about these impacts, and I know that he can speak to this issue as well.
Yep, hang on just one sec. Okay, I'll bring up Mr. Horsley, but I'm gonna try and keep this contained here so we don't get off into areas that are really well outside my purview at this point. So. Mr. Horsley.
There's a connectivity lag on our end. It takes a minute to load.
one of the things that the applicant submitted in the DEP submission was that it was an unconfined aquifer. And I still wonder if those retaining walls should not be factored in, so at least we're taking a look at a constrained aquifer.
Right, and I guess my concern on this, on that portion, Al, is that that DEP permitting is outside of our jurisdiction at this point.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay now? Scott Horsley?
I can, Mr. Horsley. Just identify yourself for the record.
Yes, Scott Horsley, representing the applicant, working for Hill Law, and along with Dr. Mike Mobile. And I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. I understand it's a late hour and a lot has been already discussed, but I'll just make 3 brief points, and I'll address your last question first, and that is relationship between, my opinion of relationship between local wetlands conservation commission permitting and DEP groundwater discharge permitting. I'm involved in many of these projects, and I can say that if we collectively are not careful, things will fall through the cracks. The best example here is the map that Dr. Mobile just showed from the applicant shows there is groundwater mounting from the wastewater plant at the location of the infiltration systems, the stormwater infiltration systems that are under your purview. So if the question is, what are the hydrologic effects of those systems, which clearly is the question, and that is within your purview, there's going to be groundwater mounting from the stormwater infiltration, but it's also going to be additive, cumulative with the wastewater impacts. So if one does not consider them at the same time, then it's impossible to answer that question. So again, this is something that I see happen. I would argue that it makes you could not possibly evaluate the impacts of these stormwater systems that are in your purview with without looking at the wastewater impacts, because the applicant has already told you their model shows it clearly that there will be groundwater mounting effect from the wastewater. This is called groundwater interference, meaning that these things need to be evaluated together. And the other question I'll mention, the other point I'll mention on wastewater, because I heard some figures earlier tonight. The wastewater flow is, I'd like to set aside the garden hose, if I may. I'm not sure that's the best analogy, and frankly, I think it purposefully might underestimate what's going on here. The design flow is 19,000 gallons per day. The base flow in the river, Dorchester Brook, is 16,500. That means that when this wastewater gets there, it's going to be more wastewater than stream. So that's for starters. And whoever is talking about nutrients, I see the shaking of the head. The numbers I'm providing, and I'd be happy to discuss them and compare, are from the U.S. Geological Survey. That's the 7Q10 flow that come from StreamStat. You may check it, Damien. And that is the flow that's used for wastewater permitting. The numbers are accurate and have not been considered yet. I think they should be. And whoever was talking about nutrients, that's exactly right. And phosphorus does move. It moves slowly. There's all kinds of publications that I've referenced in my earlier submittals to the ZBA, and I'm happy to provide here, that show that phosphorus does in fact move, will get to the stream, and needs to be considered as part of that flow. My only other comment I'm going to make is really backs up what Dr. Mobile already said, and I've said this for quite some time in this project. The groundwater elevations shown in this site, frankly, don't make sense to me. They are inconsistent, and let me say what I've already said in the letters I've submitted. The elevations at the infiltration system number 3 that we were talking about earlier are the high estimated seasonal high groundwater elevation recommended to use by the applicant is about 166 elevation. The wetlands nearby the system are at 170. Okay, that does not make sense because groundwater is higher elevation than the wetlands. Wetlands are groundwater discharge areas. So that would suggest, even with no test pit information, that I would suggest that the groundwater levels in that area should be around 170. Now, interestingly, that's not only my opinion, it's also the applicant's hydrogeologic groundwater modeling results. Because if you look at the groundwater model, it shows estimated seasonal high groundwater elevations in that area of around 170. So what I'm saying here, at a minimum, the applicant's information is inconsistent. Not only, first of all, it's inconsistent with the wetland elevations, it's also inconsistent with their own groundwater model. Compare the estimated seasonal high groundwater test pit 5 with the results of the groundwater model submitted by GeoHydrocycle, the applicant's modeling consultant. They're about 4 feet different. Doesn't make sense. And I'll conclude with the applicant's statement because I wrote it down. I thought it was very interesting. One thing they said was the site has been manipulated terribly. And I think that's true. There's a lot of fill in the site. It does not work as a typical site. There's a lot of unusual things going on here, inconsistencies. And I think we're seeing that in the test pit data. And I think that the other thing they said, and I wrote this down, the models in some places, and Mike Mobile pointed this out, the models are actually lower than what they've measured as the water table. Now, I hope everybody understands that. The applicant has submitted measured water levels in August during a dry time that are higher than the models, which is suggesting is the highest possible. I think that's, I hope people hear that and read that, because the only possible response to that is that's not possible. Something is wrong here. Either the August readings were wrong or the models were wrong. You can't have higher measured water levels than your long-term estimated seasonal high modeling levels. And again, I'll leave it there. It's in Dr. Mobile's report in great detail. It should be very clear evidence that we're not done looking at the hydrology on the site, if in fact the goal is to make sure that these infiltration systems work. And there's plenty of data provided not by us, but by the applicant's consultant that suggests that that is not the case and they will not work. And I'm happy to take any questions as well, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions specific for Mr. Horsley before I return to the, I just want to actually ask the applicant some questions based upon some information here. Okay, so seeing that Mr. Horsley, thank you very much for your contribution, and the same to Dr. Mobile as well. So, Mr. James, can you give the commission a perspective on why the groundwater level could be higher than the modeling level, as illustrated by Dr. Mobile's graph? Is there an explanation for that?
Yes, it's based on the fill that's been placed there and the overall manipulation of the groundwater level. I've seen it many times, especially in situations where you've placed a lot of fill on the site. That's not unusual when you manipulate a site like this where groundwater levels are high. I mean, the modeling levels are below the level of the water as you see it. Uh, it didn't, let's put it this way. I've seen it enough times that it didn't shock me at all when I saw it. And I think part of it too was when we looked at it, when we did the review, when you look at it, I think specifically on the two test pits, FP5 and FP6, you'll see that those were the two where specifically the groundwater levels were above the models. And but the groundwater levels that we found, or that they found, were fairly consistent with the models that they found in other areas. So it's just like I said, it doesn't shock me at all. You know, when you start placing fill up against the side of a hill like that, all of a sudden the groundwater does have the ability to be able to move through there rather than following the existing grade. As I stated, the existing grade at one point in time was down somewhere around 130, 138 at the backside of the site. So the entire site has been filled, or at least on the backside, from that outcrop that's on the western edge closest to Dorchester Brook, all the way from around to the side, according to the test pits that they submitted. So
how does an engineer or an analyst of some sort here, how do they determine which level is the correct one? I mean, is it the modeling level that is correct, or that the groundwater level is correct, or is neither correct and we need to do some other analysis to get to what the correct level is?
well, normally you would look at the modeling levels. I mean, I will admit, I'm not gonna, you know, if you do a FRMTA, normally the FRMTA will end up coming up just a little bit above the models. FRMTA will normally give you somewhere in the range of about 5 to 6 inches above the normal model levels, at least in most of the sites that I've done. If you look at FRMTA, and even FRMTA on this, if you look at it, if we applied FRMTA to this, it probably would have been about a 2.5 foot adjustment associated with the groundwater levels from June of 2021. I believe I looked at it. I believe it is somewhere in the range of about 2.5 feet, which is normal in the summer months. So that's not unusual. But the answer is no. You kind of look for consistency. You know, the way I normally balance these when you start looking at them is you look at consistency from test pit to see what the elevations are. If you see some dramatic changes, even from groundwater to models, then obviously you'd start looking at them a little bit more different. And hopefully, you know, the water levels you'd find would be more consistent.
What would be the if it was determined, let's say that the groundwater was 2 feet higher than the modeling suggests? Let's use that. And this is a theoretical discussion. This is not a one about this. If the groundwater is 2 feet higher than what the modeling suggests, what does the design of the stormwater systems look like at that point?
Well, he has two choices. He either, number one, he either picks up the site an additional 2 feet to increase it to the 4 feet, or he leaves it at the 2 feet above that level, and then he does a mounting analysis, as Mr. Mobile it indicated from the stormwater requirements. So those are his two options if we do make an adjustment to the water table.
And I want to be clear that I am not an engineer, and I'm not suggesting that that's the result here. I'm just trying to understand it from a Conservation Commission standpoint of how we look at the plan. The other question that I had, and now it's gone out of my head, I guess I'll leave it for now. Oh, what impacts? So there was some discussion earlier of impacts of ledge and recent rainfall into some of these discussions. And can you give me some perspective of what impact it might have on these?
Well, even I have to admit, Mr. Mobile, with all of the initials behind his name, probably would be able to answer it. But I'll tell you this: ledge is a confining layer. It won't let the water penetrate further down into the ground. So what happens is you have a reduction in your overall transmissivity. So you get a bigger mound associated with it when you start loading it. Not only that, but it ends up being a barrier to groundwater if you try and move laterally. So what you end up with is normally you would end up with a larger mound associated with any of these loads. because you don't have as thick a layer be carrying the water away. So that's normally what happens. I'm sorry, what was the other question? I know it was
The
ledge.
impact of recent rainwater on in the August 2021 numbers.
Well, the question mark is, and when you looked at the test bits that they conducted, I believe, I want to say test bit, not test bit 12, but test bit FP12, I think it was the one that they did. They actually had one test bit where they totally disregarded it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't inspect these, so I'm speaking only on the basis of the results that I see from the test bits, but they indicated, don't even bother looking at this because there was something in the soil or something that was manipulating the water table. So they just totally threw it out. But there was another one that they did, I believe it was FP3, where they indicated that in fact that there was pea stone that they saw in the pit. Normally when you see pea stone at any depth, it indicates that in fact that you've got some sort of either a subdrain or some sort of a structure that's actually manipulating the groundwater. So that's, like I said, this site unfortunately has been pretty beaten up. The only good thing I can say about the design, or the one good thing, is that almost every one of the systems are above grade. So at least they're starting out from a pretty good point relative to the height above groundwater.
Right. Okay. Commission members, any follow-ups to anything I said, or did that help you guys at all? It helped me a little bit.
I mean, it helped me a little bit. I just, I guess as a layman, I just find it hard to see how we're getting two different interpretations of this. So I guess I just need to square that with more info as we go along.
I think we've received an awful lot of information tonight. There's absolutely no question about it, and I, personally don't know how to digest it all in this moment. But I am very interested in trying to find the answer to this and come to a conclusion. But it doesn't necessarily need to be tonight from my perspective. But I think we've reached into some areas here that are very technical and take us a little bit more time maybe than the experts to wade our way through, for sure.
One question I would have is, Mr. Horsley, do you believe that the wall around this site will not impact on the mounding at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Horsley.
Thank you. I think that depends on where the groundwater, first of all, where the actual seasonal high groundwater is and what the mounding is. And when I say the mounding, I'm talking about the cumulative effect between the wastewater system and the stormwater. If it comes up above the bottom of that liner, then I would say the answer is yes. But I would suggest that we don't know the estimated seasonal high groundwater elevation. The one that we're using now, I don't believe is correct. And secondly, we haven't done enough groundwater mounding to know how much higher it's going to come. So I think the answer is we don't know. We don't have enough information to say that, but certainly it's close enough that it warrants a closer look, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Ms. Pyle, Dr. Mobile, I don't know who, Dr. Mobile had his hand up first, but.
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, I want to be clear because I think I heard Commission Member Crossman refer to the kind of two approaches as two different interpretations. And just to be clear, the monitoring well measurements that occurred in August, and those are coming from monitoring wells that are placed in the subsurface. The water levels are being measured. Those are direct measurements of, at the very least, the hydraulic potential in the groundwater system. So that is effectively a direct measurement of the water table condition in all likelihood. The use of redoxamorphic features, those are not direct indicators. Those are, you're inferring the position of the water table from those markings. So if there are other factors contributing to the formation of those features, they could be making them non-representative. And I'm not a soil scientist. I'm not attempting to represent myself as such, but I guess I'd pass the question to Mr. James. if that's allowable, Mr. Chair, like, we're not contending here, I hope, that these features are always 100% representative of the water table, because I just showed clear evidence that they're not.
So just, I think it's been made clear that there's different information and different things here, and I think I'll leave it at that, so.
Fair enough.
Ms. Pyle, did you have any follow-up to that?
I would just recommend that you ask for additional information from the applicant in terms of these shallow monitoring wells at the infiltration sites that Mr. Mobile recommended. And that would be a way to get clarification and actual direct data on where the groundwater, that seasonal high groundwater actually is for this site. And so we would recommend that you ask for that before making a decision on this matter. Thank you.
Noted. Okay, so given that team, Ms. Kagan, who's in a butter, has her hand raised too. So I'm gonna remove everybody else back into the regular attendees, and then we'll raise Ms. Kagan at that time. Thank you all for your input. I'm going to keep Mr. James here, but. Okay, so I think I have everybody back. I'm just going to bring up Ms. Kagan. Ms. Kagan, whenever you're ready, you can turn on your video and audio and introduce yourself for the record. Ms. Kagan?
Yeah. Okay, now you. My name is Felicity Kagan. I've lived here at 75 Union Street, 3 houses down from 91 Benson Street since 1985, August.
Just, Ms. Kagan, could you just turn on your video for me?
Okay, see video. Where is that on here? Is that it?
Using an iPad or something.
Yes. Okay. Got it?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
I lived here at 75 Union Street since 1985 with my husband, Dr. Kagan. And what I noticed from Benson Concrete Works were huge trucks coming in out of the concrete works and going to develop commercial and residential development sites and returning down Union Street with huge trucks filled with fill. And I know that he has been filling part of 91 Union Street or part of the land that Elizabeth Knapp sold him, land 87R and 89R, to fill up the ground level of that rear end of the development site. And I read this in the beta report. In accordance with Title V, Massachusetts septic inspection, fill material cannot be used for the design of subsurface sewage disposal systems. The standard practice for soil evaluators is not to characterize the fill, but merely note the depth to naturally occurring soils or native permeable soils, which is required by Title V. Can you explain to me why you think you can put septic systems in landfill that cannot drain? It's not permeable soils.
So, so I just want to make sure that all questions come through me. Okay, so, and I'll determine which direction we sort of take. This is an opportunity for you to make comments here. Questions, I'll determine whether or not we sort of go another route. As I heard earlier today, the fill was primarily on the rear portion of the property, and in fact, that the soils at the front portion of the property where the groundwater treatment facility is meant to be located those soils were determined to be good soils for a subsurface system. So that was my understanding of what I heard today. Damien, could you just correct me if I misinterpreted that, or is that what was stated earlier?
You are correct. The tests that were done at the front of the site were within existing soils. That was existing soil to the surface. The fill was towards the back of the site where the soil absorption system is not proposed.
Thank you.
But what about drainage? What about drainage when they say that if it's not native permeable soil, then you will have poor test pit sites and poor drainage from groundwater, from septic and leaching fields? How are you expected to drain that when you have poor drainage site from landfill?
Don't even know where to go with that. So, I mean, I think we've spent probably the last hour and 20 minutes discussing whether or not the infiltration systems that are proposed on the site, infiltration systems 1, 2, and 3, are sufficient to handle the not only the stormwater but any other additional drainage that may be happening. And I don't know that we have a conclusive answer to that tonight, but that is where we're trying to get to. So I do appreciate the comment.
Yeah. So will you be able to obtain let me see, what is it called? The estimated seasonal high groundwater accuracy in the test pits at the appropriate time, say January, February, and March, when the water levels around here are at its highest?
That is what we're here to determine. You are spot on with that question. That is where we are right today, right at this moment at 7:57 p.m.
Because remember, I told you this, that when I buried my dogs, 2 dogs, in my backyard at 3 feet, I hit water. And it's so bad around here.
I can appreciate that, and certainly at any elevation somewhere in the neighborhood of what the wetland elevation is going to be immediate groundwater. So,
and it will be the same over Benson's, the same problems over at Benson's.
We're here to determine that, whether the groundwater is at 166 or 170, it's going to make a difference, and that's what we're here to determine.
All right.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we are, having absorbed all of that information. I actually have I do want to thank both the applicant, Mr. James, and Dr. Mobile and Mr. Horsley for the information that's been conveyed tonight. I actually do have a better understanding of the situation and the concerns of the abutters, as well as the position of the applicant. I'll be honest and say I'm going to need some time to figure that out and figure out what the next best approach, whether or not we're looking at obtaining further information, what that information might be, whether or not we would request some sort of additional information to be gathered over time. I don't know the answer to that question right now, and I'm not quite sure I'm in a position to draw that conclusion right now, because a lot of this information is new to me tonight, and so that's my perspective. I don't know if Nate or Al has any comments.
I appreciate everyone like I said, I have a better understanding of this topic now. But, you know, I agree with Rory that I need to process all that information now.
Al, any final comments from you? Did we lose Al? No, he's there.
He waved you off.
Ah,
He mouthed you a no.
thank you, Al. I appreciate
No
it.
other comments. Thank you.
So, if the applicant is amenable to it, and I hope that they are, I would like to suggest a continuance here. I agree with Mike's assessment earlier that the wetland delineation and the remediation, the replication stuff is, I think that stuff is nailed down, you know, and I think we had some final questions about visual barriers, which are sort of minor things, just locations and whatnot, which I think is pretty straightforward, to be honest. But I think we do have to get to this estimated seasonal, you know, high groundwater analysis, because that's gonna really inform all of our decisions based upon the stormwater management system. And so I think I need to circle back with Jennifer and the consultant and really find the best approach for us to do that, whether or not we feel like we have enough information or whether we need additional information. And I can't even tell you right this moment whether or not I do it. So I know it's not what we wanted tonight, we being the collective group here, or we're hoping to get to, but I think given the information, it would be prudent for us to continue and figure out where to go from here. But I will let you make the decision whether or not you'd like to continue.
I think we can go ahead and continue to the next meeting, Mr. Chairman, and see if we, first of all, don't get some final response from DEP, which we've been waiting for quite a while.
Right.
And then to give you and Jen and the other commissioners time to talk about what else you feel you need to come to a decision about whether or not we are impacting wetland resources, because that's the bottom line here.
100%. We are all on the same page about that. I mean, that is what we're trying to understand here with this last piece.
Okay. When is your next hearing?
November 7th.
Okay.
I'm only going to add that the discussion with the commission is only at a public hearing.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It sounded like it might be outside the meeting.
But you can talk to the chair.
I can talk to the chair
Yes.
and I can talk with the consultant, but the rest of the whole commission is not having a discussion. Just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes. Okay, so so you're agreeable to a continuance to November 7th?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no further public comment, I'm going to make a motion to continue to 91 Union Street to November 7th.
Second.
Caulfield's with Crossman second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, aye.
Caulfield's aye. So 3-0 to continue. That's it. So we'll see you guys in a few weeks.
All right. Thank you
You'll
very
prob-
much.
you'll
Have a good
probably
evening.
hear from us in the meantime anyway. So
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I really do appreciate everyone's time. So thank you. I almost hit the leave button.
Not yet.
No, I know.
Thinking about it though.
So we actually don't have a ton left here. So
Yeah,
so just one thing. Is Scott Rogers still in the waiting room?
he is.
So let's just take 15. Oh, so he's at 5:34. But just as a point of information for everybody, that if someone's waiting for 59 Watt Meeting House, which I don't think they are, that will get continued. So we'll go from there. So next up is 464 Foundry, which has requested a continuance. Do we need to vote on that? as it was on the agenda. So 464 Foundry Street, make a motion to continue to November 7th.
Benson, second.
Caulfield's Benson, second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. Scott Rogers is here for 534 Washington Street. This is a continued hearing for a notice of intent for building additions, loading docks, increased pavement and parking, and modifications of the bioretention basin. Scott?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Scott Rogers from JK Holmgren Engineering. Just have a semi-brief presentation for you, if you don't mind me going through that.
Sure.
So we met with you guys, I believe it was it was in August, I believe. And since that time, we have had a review consultant, John Cheshire, has reviewed the plans and drainage report and all of the documents that were submitted. We received one letter from John Cheshire. I believe that was August 8th was the date of that. We also met with Mr. Cheshire and Jennifer to discuss and review the project and his initial comments as well. We also performed some maintenance on the existing drainage systems that are on the site. We cleaned out catch basins. We also cleaned and inspected the stormwater quality tank. That was found to be functioning properly, and as well as the underground infiltration system that was installed, I believe, about 2018. We also took a look at the existing above ground retention system in the back towards the wetland area. And we did find that there is some minor erosion areas that we need to repair back there. And I think one of the biggest items that we discovered, which was brought up by Mr. Churchill as well, was that the area basically has been, I don't want to use the word forested, but there's a lot of vegetation in there that really should not be there. So I kind of agree with the comments that have been made so far that we need to remove that vegetation, but I would prefer, and I think it's obvious, that we should not be doing any grubbing in there, but basically, cutting down small trees and shrubs and basically getting down to what would be the herbaceous layer, I guess. And we always felt, though, that we need a permit to do that because it is defined as a wetland. So I don't really feel comfortable telling my client to be doing maintenance in an area that's subject to the Wetlands Protection Act. So the next thing that happened was we did respond to the comments that were made initially, and the next review letter came out on October 6th. And I can go through those comments if you want briefly. I don't know. I think Jen has basically put a lot of those into what's potentially the conditions, but I can give you some quick synopsis of it if you like.
Yep.
All right. So there's probably 9 comments, and I'll be brief about those. So he did comment about the inspection report, and I believe I gave you that. I can put that in writing, obviously, which would probably be helpful. And the client is committed to doing, I would call, a better job of maintenance, specifically on, well, both systems, I guess, but they have the new O&M plan. They'll be getting that. The new site contractor, when that person is hired, will be getting that as well. Second one would be, we'll be doing some riprap sizing calculations just to document the fact that we do have a couple of riprap areas that we want to make sure we're appropriately sizing. The third one would be cleaning that basin that I talked about, removing vegetation, also fixing that erosion. But I would say that I would prefer not to do any soil excavation on the bottom of that system. Mr. Cheshire made a comment about that being a potential condition. That's on page 8 of his last letter. I would say that would probably be a bad idea because it is wetland vegetation, and I wouldn't want to remove that. The fourth one would be the comment about test pits. We actually feel like we should not be doing additional test pits. The last one that we did was within 10 feet of the proposed infiltration system. But if the commission feels that's appropriate, we will certainly do additional test pits for that particular. It's a small area that's covering the loading, I'm going to call it loading dock, a loading area, and the infiltration system for that small building addition. The next one would be number 5, and that's the groundwater mounding that was done. And I just want to say a couple things that Mr. Cheshire put in the letter, and I'm quoting him when I say this. He basically said on page 10, as currently designed, the mounding will have minimal impact on the 100-year storm, end quote. And then on page 11, he noted that I note that it's likely that 2 feet of separation is provided based on available data. And he used this program that is the USGS open source program. The one I happen to use is called the Handtouche method. The second item would be on page 11 and 12. That basically talks about the cleaning of the basin as far as the vegetation, but it also talks about the addition of putting in catch basin hoods, which we have agreed to do, and those notations are on our plans. Number 7 would be some minor comments about our erosion control, our sediment and erosion control notes. I would call them minor comments in quotation, but there's maybe some cleanup of some notes. Number 8 would be adding an additional overflow spillway. Mr. John Cheshire did have us model the existing retention basin. And when we did that, we found that it wasn't basically handling the full 100-year storm. And one of the recommendations that between Mr. Cheshire and ourselves came up with was to put in a riprap overflow spillway so that the water would not erode the top of the basin and, create damage, but it would basically go through that riprap spillway for the 100-year storm. But we are hoping that we can do that with hand methods and not use machinery. I think that would be a bad idea to bring machinery back there, disturbing more areas. And then last but not least would be a comment about the illicit discharge statement and his recommendation that we could potentially provide information for that prior to occupancy of the building, which we would have no problem doing on that. And then we did receive a staff report from Jennifer and her comments. There was a few of them. One was about the construction exit, which we can certainly fix that. And one was about the no disturbance posts. We have like an older detail that we need to upgrade and change to a more current standard, so we can do that. And one of the other ones that she had was a duplication of what Mr. Cheshire had talked about as far as the maintenance on that existing retention basin. And just as a side note to all of this, the site was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board last week. So I'm looking forward to any questions or comments that you may have.
So Scott, will you have a revised plan for us then if you're adding the detail on the visual barriers, on the posts and the markers?
I can get you revised plans for those, yeah.
Okay. And the the hoods weren't installed in the catch basin when they were being cleaned. That's something they're going to do?
Yeah, that'll be done by the site contractor.
Okay, do they need to empty the basins again to do that?
Well, I guess it depends on when that construction period happens. They're probably talking about getting a permit this fall. And realistically, they're probably talking about starting construction January or somewhere in that facility. So we'll be in the middle of winter. I would recommend that we probably clean them out again after all the sanding and not salting, but sanding of parking lots. It would probably make sense to do that again in the spring.
Okay, thanks. I don't have anything else for them. Thank you.
Thanks. Jennifer, did Mr. Rogers cover everything that was necessary here from our perspective?
Yes, whatever was recommended by John Cheshire as a condition have been added to the draft order.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the commission? A couple of shakes of the heads. Any public comment for 534 Washington Street? I'm seeing none. Jennifer, do you need anything from the conditions on our side? Are we all set?
Nope, you're good. You had the draft in your packet.
Yep, everything looked good. Okay. Scott, do you want to close?
I'd love to close the hearing if possible.
Any discussion about closing from the commission? You make a motion to close 534 Washington Street.
Second,
Caulfield's Benson second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. Any further discussion from the commission? Okay, so I'll make a motion to issue a permit for work and order conditions for 534 Washington Street. Noting that Mr. Rogers must submit a revised plan to reflect the changes as discussed.
Benson, second.
Caulfield's Benson second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. Okay,
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that.
Scott, while I have you here,
Sure.
59 Meeting House, you had suggested that we were gonna get a continuance here. Do you want to give us a date so when we get to that point, we can put a date out there? Is November 7th the next date? Are you going to be prepared for that?
I'm going to say yes. I just talked to Scott Farrier probably 2 hours ago, and that's our intention. So yes.
Okay, just want to make sure once we got there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Right.
Okay, so next up is a certificate of compliance for 876 Washington Street.
Yeah, that's ready to be issued.
Any questions from the commission? Any public comment? 876 Washington Street. Seeing none, make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 876 Washington Street.
Second.
Caulfield's Crossman second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. So 15 Rollins Road, did you say we got a continuance on this one?
We did a request to continue to 11/7.
We're just stacking 11/7 right now.
Yes, we are.
Not that this wasn't stacked. Okay, so just to, okay, I'll leave it be. I was out there yesterday or Saturday, whatever day it was. So just as a point of information, I don't think that the grass in the back is any different than it was when the original conditions, just so you know.
Okay.
I mean, I understand where it is and where its location is. I don't think they've changed it. So make a motion to issue to continue 15 Rollins Road. I know I wanted to November 7th.
Benson, second.
Caulfield's Benson second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. As we've already heard, we're going to continue certificate of compliance for 59 Meeting House Lane to November 7th. That's a motion. I need a second.
Benson, second.
Caulfield's Benson second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. Okay, we have no updates on our enforcements. Next up is 39 Winterberry Hills. This was a request to change the pervious driveway. The discussion started last meeting. This is a development, 44 units off of Union Street. Yes, Union Street. And there's a stream crossing and a whole bunch of other stuff going on over there. And
At the last meeting, you guys asked for a copy of the plan, so that was in your packet. Ben had asked if it was within the buffer zone. This particular driveway is not, but even if it's outside of the buffer zone, the impervious surface contributes to the drainage system, just to make that clear. The management company did get back to me today and said that their landscape contractor does maintain the rain gardens and the swales in accordance with the operation and maintenance plan. They also handle the snow removal with a prohibition on excessive sanding. They also do street sweeping and vacuuming performed by Clean Horizons. But that's just a summary. They have their board meeting tomorrow night, so they were going to get more information at that time. So that was just, we wanted to know, how are you actually maintaining the system? The resident had contacted us asking to pave the driveway instead of the pervious pavers that were installed as part of the project. Most of our comments were there's not a whole lot of room to now infiltrate on individual properties if people just were allowed to change from pervious pavers to paving.
So as I understood pardon me for jumping in here, guys. As I understood the discussion, she's not talking about putting pervious pavement down, right? She's talking about replacing and doing work to repair her pervious pavers. Because is that what?
Originally, she was trying to do that, but she couldn't get a contractor to work on the pervious pavers unless there were multiple people. There's a whole lot of P's in this.
Yeah.
Pervious pavers and enough people. So then she asked if they could just pave the driveway as regular paving.
Okay, so I'm my own position is I'm opposed to it at many levels. So I mean, I think that it's a challenging situation to get any contractor out to do any work right now. And I don't think I could use that as a rationale to go from pervious to impervious surface. And as Jennifer points out, there's 44 units here. I mean, we could be cascading this down the road here to all of a sudden we've got 5,000 extra square feet of impervious surface that we didn't account for in the stormwater management system. So that's my thought process. Is just it's going to be line somebody up now and try and get it done. Any other thoughts? I mean, I will say that I have not been out to the site, so I can't tell you what her driveway looks like. Is it like missing pavers and stuff, or it just needs to be? Do you have any sense, Jen?
I don't believe so, but I was planning to do another site inspection once I got the report, so I could look at all the rest of the drainage system as well.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you get the report from the board tomorrow or the next day, whenever you get it from them, about what their normal operation and maintenance is for these pervious driveways.
Yep.
And after we get that, over the next 3 weeks, you and I go take a look. But I think that, from my perspective, I think that we probably should just say, well, it's going to take you a while to get it done. Maybe by the time you get around to it, maybe you will find 2 or 3 other neighbors that do want to get it done. So maybe after the winter, something happens, people jump in. So I'm sympathetic to the question, the homeowner, but I think that's my position.
Okay.
Any other comments from Al or Nate? No. Okay. I did read the minutes. I didn't note any problems. Anybody have any issues with them? So we have executive session meeting minutes and regular meeting minutes. We can approve them, and then we can decide whether to release the executive session minutes. I would suspect that we should hold those for now.
For the moment.
For the moment. Which also, well, let's get to the minutes. Let's approve the minutes. So let's, anybody have any comments on the regular minutes?
No.
Seeing none, make a motion to approve and release the regular meeting minutes for October, I don't know what, third.
Second.
Roll call vote. Caulfield's, Crossman second.
Vincent, aye.
Crossman, aye.
Caulfield's aye. So let's make a motion to, any comments on the executive session minutes?
No.
So let's make a motion to approve but hold the executive session minutes for October 3rd.
Second.
Caulfield's, Benson second. Roll call vote.
Vincent, aye.
Crossman, aye.
Caulfield's aye. There are still 1 executive session meeting minutes that are open still. it was related to Canton Street. The lease at Canton Street.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe next meeting we decide whether we're releasing those or not.
Could we get those distributed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair updates. So there's a new committee. It's a multi-town,
Hazard.
multi-department effort here for the hazard mitigation plan planning committee. That's a lot of words. So we're looking for a representative for the Concom. We obviously have some impact related to floods and everything else. So don't anybody have any interest in participating in this? The first meeting is this week sometime.
What, yeah, I mean, I volunteer. I mean, Al's volunteer for something, I can volunteer.
Thank you, Nate.
It's not like on Friday night, is it?
No, it could be worse though. It's actually Thursday at 1 p.m.
Oh, is that going to preclude me from volunteering? Because I won't be able to make that meeting. I'll be doing lunch duty with 4th and 2nd graders.
You could do it right from then. I'm just
Be
kidding.
preferable.
So
Like how, can I watch? Is that like one where I could watch, like when I do the Mullins things we here, watch it on ECAT?
So I don't know. Jennifer, do you have any sense of, I mean, she's booked, the meeting has been booked for 2 hours at 1 o'clock. And so I know that sort of precludes my participation. I don't know how to block off 2 hours in the middle of an afternoon for me. I mean, I can get an hour, but for 2 is like
Yeah,
challenging.
like I could probably do like 2 to 3, but I don't think I could do 1. I can't do 1 to 2.
So I don't know if this is normally going to be a 1 o'clock type meeting, or and whether or not that really fits in with all the other volunteer boards.
I'll volunteer reluctantly, but maybe one of the other committee members could replace me. But if I'll attend the one on Thursday if you want.
Yeah, so why don't we do this, Al? So why don't you attend, and you can maybe even raise the issue to the commission as they start to go through the sort of mechanics of it, to say, listen, 1 o'clock really doesn't work for our commission for any of the other members other than me, and I'm already the CPC representative and committing a tremendous amount of time on Tufts Farm and a bunch of other things that you know, I don't think it's correct. I mean, your assessment is maybe someone else can do it is right. But maybe you could in your sort of first meeting there, so you sort of ask about the mechanics. Is it always going to be midday? Is it always going to be
All right.
2 hours? You know, it's multi-jurisdictional, so you know, are all the other towns? I mean, there's going to be 30 people on this call. I mean, it seems like you know, a challenge. So why don't we nominate you as the representative? You can come back to us, and you can always come back to me and say, listen, I can't do it anymore, and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm more than happy to volunteer if this.
If we can find out that it's a different time, yes.
Sure.
Right.
I'll explore that.
Thank you. So I nominate Al Benson for representative, Conservation Commission representative for the Hazard Mitigation Plan Planning Committee.
Second.
Roll call vote. Call for.
Crossman,
Yeah,
aye.
go ahead. Yeah.
Crossman, aye. What is, yeah.
Henson, aye.
Oh,
Call
sorry.
for.
I didn't know if
That's
he could
okay.
vote for himself.
I went out of order too. I really screwed it up. CPC committee updates.
We had a meeting.
Just one second, Al. So you have to get sworn in before Thursday.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'll go do it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good point. Then we had a meeting this week, and 3 items were tabled. They were all related to the school system. I'm not going to get into the details, but two two were quantified at over $1 million apiece, and another one was probably will come in at that same order or more. And then we had preliminary discussions with that, let's say, an alert to the committee that the Olmsted Hall, Oak Ames Hall, is probably going to be on the order of $8 to $12 million. Not sure, but that's significantly more than just the $2 million that we get annually. So that's going to be some. There's an awful lot of competition for limited funds. One thing I had committed to was to try to find out if there was additional money that left over from previous authorized activities, and we're working on that. Preliminary indication it's worth pursuing. Then there's probably over $250,000 that we can pursue, get closed out, and shift to available funds. So
Great work. Yeah. Great
So
job.
both Stephanie and Wayne are on that one as well as myself.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work on that, Al. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Environmental planner updates.
All right, I will try to go quickly here. Clifford Grant, we didn't get the right of entry form yet from town council. They're on vacation, so they're back this week. We'll ask them to finish drafting that so we can send it to Mr. Doyle. We did give notice to proceed to Clim Engineering for the survey and the wetland work. So we can reroute that trail. Tufts Farmers RFP was released, so it's out now. The open house is on Saturday, October 29th from 9 till noon. We're taking appointments for that. 2 people have asked for a copy for the application forms. Thanks to Al for all the work with the pest control and meeting them on site, and the cleaning company. I'll meet with them on Thursday, and the chimney inspection. I will call for them to do that. Merrill revised their bid for creating the survey plan of the property and creating the parking area. So originally they were at $13,750, but it didn't include soil testing or the stormwater work. They've revised their application to be $15,950. That includes everything that we had requested in the RFP. The only other bid we received was for $23,550. So big discrepancy there still, but we have enough information to award that contract if you're ready to go forward with that. So I would say Merrill's revised contract at $15,950 would be appropriate.
So we can do that right now.
Yes.
So any discussion from the commission? So I make a motion to award the survey work and other work indicated to Merrill at $15,950.
Second.
Caulfield's Benson, second. Roll call.
Benson, aye.
Crossman, aye.
Caulfield's aye.
Thank you. We do have a letter from the Office of Dam Safety. We've been trying to get our consultant to give us an estimate to do the phase 1 inspections for New Pond, Old Pond, and Long Pond dams. We finally got the estimate from Ty and Bond. It's $16,500 to do the phase 1 and the emergency action plans for all 3 dams. There's not much of a choice here. It's required by Office of Dam Safety. We've already blown past the first deadline. We have to do it before the end of December. The Ty and Bond has said that they will get it done in that time frame. You do have the funds in the conservation fund. So
that was going to be my question is, are we sufficiently funded to do this?
You have the funds for that. I just didn't want to sign it until you knew how much it was, and we're like, yes, that's okay to spend. So
I make a motion to authorize Jen to execute the contract with Ty and Bond for the phase 1 dam safety and emergency, whatever it was.
Plans.
Second.
Plans. I did pretty good up till that point.
You did very well.
Bailey out.
Caulfield and Crossman, roll call vote.
Benson, aye.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Anything else from the commission? Appreciate everybody's time tonight. I know it went a lot longer than expected, and hopefully Jen and I can put our heads together and figure out where we want to go with the.
Yes. Well done, everyone. Rory, nice job. That was a lot of information.
A lot of information. I learned so much tonight.
It
I
actually
learned more tonight.
it started to make a little sense. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
the graphic really helped. Honestly, the graphic was a big help.
yeah, I think the way he was able to spin it around helped me.
Mhm.
You know, so I saw the graphic he sent with his response this afternoon, but the one where he was able to spin it around and give me the three-dimensional look made more sense to me.
Yes.
So I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody's time and commitment to this. Not just I know we all do a lot of work outside of this meeting, and it really does take time, and I do appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody, committing to me to get to the meeting tonight, because otherwise we wouldn't have a meeting. So I do appreciate you showing up. So once again, make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Caulfield's Benson, second. Roll call.
Benson, I.
Crossman, I.
Caulfield's aye. Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone. Good night.
Ish. Bye-bye.